Good morning, everyone. Buenos días, Cayetana.
Buenos días.
They didn't let me speak to you in Spanish.
No, we're going to speak English.
We will speak English,
Lingua
but it's sad
franca.
because I love when you speak Spanish. You're so charismatic. I have to say something. I'm very lucky to have you with me this morning. I've been admiring you for years, following you in social medias. And a friend of ours told me, you know what? She's my cousin. So I met with you and we decided to have this conversation. She is the future of Spain. She is this kind of woman you want to know, to empower, to help across Europe, because we need people like you. We need you. So today, you're going to have a voice here at FII. You've never been. I hope you will come back. And we will do whatever we can to help you, to bring to Spain the sparkle that no longer exists. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. I've admired Cecilia for many, many years. Many Spaniards have. She's been a reference for many of us. And it's a real privilege to be able to have this conversation with you. Thank you, Richard, as well, and all the organization. This is the most amazing event. I hope it's not my last. I certainly will do everything possible to be with you in other events like this.
Thank you for being here. So let's start a little bit. My dear Cayetana, how is Spain doing economically today?
Well, the first thing, obviously a disclaimer, as Cecilia mentioned, I'm a politician. I know politicians are not the most popular people today, but I'm particularly grateful that you've brought a politician on stage because, as I say, nothing is more important than politics. Finally, it's politicians who are making decisions that you guys, other people, have to comply with, regulations, rules. So we need the best people in politics. And this is a small introduction to talk about Spain briefly. Maybe we'll talk also about European context. And Spain is looking good in the big macro figures, but feeling bad in the real micro figures. So what people are experimenting. No? There is growth, and the GDP figures are good, but that growth is not translating into well-being. We are not converging. We are still 8% below average in EU convergence. And this is happening because Spanish growth is based on volume, not on productivity. It's based on more public debt. It's based on EU funds, which are poorly administered and will not last forever, obviously. And it's based essentially on immigration. So you have a bigger base, more immigrants, but no productivity. And the problem is a lot of young people, particularly young people, are having an extremely tough time. Tough time finding housing, huge housing crisis.
You told me it's 25%.
25% youth unemployment, over a 15% EU average. 25% of risk of poverty and social exclusion in Spain, in a very strongly growing economy, one of the most growing in Europe, which is also the stark contrast between the big facts and the small facts. And then political and institutional crisis. People, when I explain this in other countries in Europe, they're in shock. Or in the US, I was in Washington a few days ago and I said, you know, we haven't had an approved budget in 3 years.
That's crazy.
Because there is no majority in Parliament for an approved budget. And so the budget has been, you know, taken over and over and over, the budget from the last term, from the previous government. No? So we have a political crisis, we have bad figures on the local level, on the well-being level, and then a mentality, and this connects with Europe, which is based on regulation and subsidies. And so the most shocking figure really is, I saw it in the newspaper a few weeks ago, in a poll. You asked young Spaniards, you know, what do they want to do in life? What do they want to become? Entrepreneurs, builders, creators, innovators, tech giants? And the answer for 60% of them is, we want to be civil servants. That is a civilizational alarm bell.
No risk.
No risk-taking.
No entrepreneur.
So we need to change this whole thing. You know, we need reforms, we need a change of economic model, and we need a change of mentalities.
And you were talking about politics. For me, politics is very noble because that touches economy, health, culture, everything that rules a country. We have to stop criticizing politicians. We have to help you guys to do a great job.
Well, we need to be criticized on many fronts. You know, we need politicians who speak the truth. And that is probably one of the main problems we have. The politicians have mistaken political correctness with political cowardice, you know? And are afraid of speaking the truth. And the European crisis, to a large extent, is a crisis of truth and therefore of trust in institutions. No?
Absolutely. So, can a country remain attractive to investor if we trust in politics, media institutions, if that trust continues to decline?
No, certainly not in the long run. I believe there's no economic health without political, democratic, institutional health in a country, no? And a case study, a very extreme case study, obviously, is Venezuela. And we talk about Venezuelan recovery. I always say first democracy and then economic prosperity after that, not the other way around, no? And across Europe, as I was suggesting, no, we really need to recover trust in institutions, in the media, and in politics. And the way of doing so, I think, is to start speaking the truth about certain things. No, Juncker, many years ago, said something which I think really synthesizes the European crisis. He said, "We politicians, we all know what we have to do, but we don't know how to get re-elected if we do what we know we have to do." And the result of that kind of thinking has been three major problems or threats to European progress, which is fictions, dogmas, and hyper-regulation. Fictions, the idea that peace would be permanent, and America would always provide. That was the first big fiction. And that ended up with, you know, dismantling armies, cutting our defense budgets, and now obviously having serious trouble saying, you know, how are we going to rearm and prepare for the new era? The second fiction was the idea that the welfare state would always provide. The idea, you know, that money just falls from the trees.
Yeah.
And that obviously doesn't happen. And the result of that was expanding budgets, strain in institutions, and social tensions. And the third fiction, still there, is the idea that prosperity can remain with no productivity. No productivity, you still can be guarantee prosperity for people, and that's not true, no? No growth means no welfare, no defense, no future for many people. If you add to that the dogmas, the green dogma, you know, the idea that we could sacrifice workers today for the planet tomorrow, or it was a good idea, the idea of the green dogma, but not taken to a dogmatic extreme.
Yeah.
Or the multicultural dogma, the idea that you could integrate infinite numbers of people with no problems, no, and immigration, and we have to say that clearly, you know, that it has to have limits, and values are important, and integration is essential.
Have you seen the law that passed at the European Union yesterday, regulating the immigration for the countries in Europe?
Yes, this is reality striking back. I always say that populism is the revenge of reality against political correctness.
Yeah.
No? When you've been politically correct and you've, you know, speaking the truth about things and of evidence-based politics, you've shied away from that and been very scared of speaking the truth about things. That ends up fueling populist movements and nationalist anti-European movements. So it's so important to recover the truth. And the third issue, obviously, is hyper-regulation. The third threat to European progress and prosperity is the obsession with regulation.
Europe speaks a lot about values. How do we translate values such as truth, merit, and rule of law into economic growth?
Yeah, values. Well, speaking about values is great, but then you have to implement those values.
Yes.
No? As you said, no rule of law, obviously, that's essential. That's institutions. We know that Acemoglu, you know, won his Nobel Prize on the idea that, no, it's not geography, it's not culture. Institutions are crucial. If you can have low taxes but captured courts, that's not good enough. You can have better regulation but no independent enforcement, that's not good enough. We need really institutions to make property rights real and to make investment rational. No? So we really need institutions that respect the rule of law and are the incarnation of those values. And the most important, as I said earlier, I think really is to start to say in politics publicly what we say privately. And a lot of politicians are scared of doing that.
Yes.
We need to speak truth to the citizens, to talk to them as adults who are responsible for their destiny, no? And to make sure that they will recover something essential, which is, we've forgotten in Europe, which is the idea that dignity comes from work, a work ethic.
Exactly.
I was brought up in Argentina, and Argentina is an extreme example of what populism can do to a country, you know? The idea that you can live off the state permanently, that subsidies are the way forward. And that destroys a country, not only economically, it destroys a country also morally, you know? Because as human beings, our sense of dignity, our sense of purpose comes really from what we do in life.
Exactly.
From what our work,
Exactly.
from our work.
But I know that people, when you speak the truth, they listen and they can understand and they can change their mentality. That's something I'm convinced of.
I think so, true. I think so as well. I think truth is the really the revolutionary factor in politics nowadays. And what people, I think, are angry about is that politicians haven't told them the truth about the
Because
limits of the welfare state, about immigration, about defense, about so many issues. No,
how do we attract the right people into politics to
that's
change?
that's not easy because talented young people who can make a living and a very good living in the private sector, you know, shy away from politics. Politics has become a very messy, unpleasant business where feelings override evidence, you know. But as I said at the beginning, there's nothing more important than politics because it's politics that is going to take those decisions that are going to affect so many people. Let's talk about regulation, for example. No? A recent decision, Apple has decided, or finally, not to implement its AI Siri, no, AI-powered Siri in Europe for 450 million users because of European Brussels excess regulation. There's been a conflict between Brussels and Apple, the result of which is that 450 million consumers in Europe won't be able to use that AI. So political decisions have tremendous consequences for people's lives. So we have to make sure that the best people in society really spend some time in politics as a public duty. And for that, we need to make sure that the political ecosystem makes it possible for people like that, who are intelligent, have a real sense of purpose and of duty, can survive in politics. Yes. How can we do that? That's not easy. We need to
How someone like you
survive.
not only survived, but decided one day that duty, love of your country, comes first.
That's, I mean, this is vocational, obviously, but you have to have that sense of mission in you, and I have that. I mean, that's a mission.
It is.
But again, you don't have to create an ecosystem that requires heroes in politics. You know, people with a sense of a mission. You know, you need excellent people to be ready to spend some time in this business without being destroyed in the middle, no? And we need to invest in truth as well. For example, in the public conversation now, which has turned completely not only sour but impossible, we need to restore truth in the public conversation. What do I mean by this? If opinions have completely overridden facts, and facts have become completely a matter of opinion, then we can't discuss. In the public arena, if you say, I feel there are 3 bottles of water here, it's just my feelings that are override facts, and I'm saying, no, there are two bottles here, it's impossible for us to have a conversation.
Yeah, of course.
So when facts disappear, there is no democracy. And for that, we need to restore evidence-based politics. Science has to come into politics in some form or another. We need to make that cross again between facts and politics.
Your entire
Science and politics.
I could speak
That's
for
not an easy
hours
job.
with you, but time is running out. So I've just a last question. How can you attract entrepreneurs, investors in your country? What can you say to attract those people to believe in the future of your country?
I think I'd say absolutely. I'm an optimist. I think
Me too. Good.
absolute optimist. I hate pessimists. I think pessimists are it's badly maleducados.
Maleducados?
Boring.
Not well
And
raised.
not only that, I think pessimism is a great ally of populism, because pessimism says, everything's so ghastly, everything's going to go so badly that we need a messiah, we need a strong man, we need a caudillo. And I don't believe in that. I think we need responsible citizens,
Exactly.
So I don't like pessimism. I like rational optimism. I like the man in the arena, the wonderful speech by Roosevelt, I am the man in the arena, the one who is not in the barrier saying, oh, politicians are doing it awfully, but who actually, fights his way there. And I would tell those young people, to invest absolutely, but with open eyes. I would say, first of all, if you don't want to invest in Europe, you're not being a disloyal European or a disloyal whatever partner. It's not your blame. You're not to blame. That couldn't be a rational decision. What we have to do is to fix the reasons to make sure that you want to invest here. And the EU is not a lost cause at all. It is the most extraordinary place. It's a place, it has assets that no regulation can destroy, the best universities in the world, talent and extraordinary talent, 450 million consumers, and rules, certain rules that are essential for good investment. And it has something else, which is reality that is forcing our hand. It is the most powerful reformer in history is reality. The war has, in a way, is forcing Europeans to come to terms with reality. So bet on Europe, on the Europe that could exist, on the Spain that could exist, but make sure that you also make it happen. And there, just to finish off, because I think we're sort of moving on to other people's times, I would say 4 or 5 things. First of all, we need open markets. We need a single market that's going to produce much more energy and productivity than any subsidy. In the second place, we need to cut red tape. We need to cut bureaucracy. Every hour spent on compliance is an hour lost for building, creating, and innovating. Third of all, we need to make energy cheap and abundant.
Yeah.
And that means nuclear. In my country, nuclear is a bad word.
I know.
In France, it isn't, but we need abundant energy. 4, we need to restore merit, the concept of merit over
That's so
ideology,
important.
over identity politics. We need to restore the concept of excellence and the ethics of work and dignity. And last of all, and putting it all together again, as I mentioned earlier many times, I think we have to tell the people, speak the truth to our citizens. And that is a way of recovering their trust in politics, in institutions. Tell the truth, even though the truth may be blood, soil, sweat, and tears. The Churchillian phrase, said, toil, blood, toil, sweat, and tears.
And tears.
But it's better. Painful reform is better than comfortable decline and decadence.
Thank you so much, Cayetana.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Good.